Hello, everyone, and welcome. We've got another episode of Let's Develop for you. I'm Chris Woolley, your host. Now, if this is your first time joining us, welcome. This is a bi-weekly webinar series brought to you by American Color Imaging. So huge shout out to them for helping bring this on. So what we do is we've got a cool webinar. Every 2 weeks, we've got a new episode, and basically we reach out to find awesome photographers in our industry that want to share with our community. And they're just dropping in an hour a ton of information, and we're just sharing our passion that's here. If you did happen to miss the last episode that we did, we had James on, and he was talking about clicking with your wedding clients. So kind of fun to be able to do that, learn some tips and tricks for connecting and being genuine in it. So that's definitely a fun thing. And today we're going to be learning how to become a photographic pet whisperer with Angela, and she has a very, very impressive. Your picture's live now, Angela, so no nose picking or anything like that. But she's got a very, very impressive backstory here. She's master photographer, craftsman, CPP. Very, very involved in the PPA community, being a council member on the certification committee. She's a member of Professional Photographers of Michigan and a past president of Professional Photographers of Western Michigan. Spent multiple years as a CPPA liaison. And there's a lot more. So she started 25 years ago in the industry, and then in 2013, she started focusing more on pet portraiture, which is kind of cool. Has worked as a veterinary assistant where she learned all sorts of mad skills when it comes to working with our fuzzy animals there. I guess not just fuzzy ones too. And says that it doesn't hurt if it has a soft spot for anything with fur, feathers, or even scales. And holy cow, that's a whole bunch of information, but we are officially here, and I am so excited to learn. I know that our group is too. If anybody does have questions at any point during this, put them into chat. Angela's going to be answering them live for us. So, Angela, you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
All right.
Huh?
What do you got for us?
So, welcome everyone. I'm glad everybody is here. And Chris and I were talking earlier, kind of put in the chat right now, just real quick in the next 30 seconds. Tell me what kind of pets that you actually photograph right now. Whether it's just dogs or whether you get into some of the other, specialty niches and that type of thing. I kind of want to know, a little bit about the audience I'm working with.
Yeah, Colleen does cats, Alan does dogs, Daniel does dogs. Holy cow, we're getting lots of people responding back in here. Dogs, couple of cats, dogs, some horses and cats, dogs, mostly dogs and cats, and hooved animals, dogs and horses.
Awesome.
17 dogs for a breeder. Dogs, cats. We got a bird on here now. Horses.
Woohoo!
Dogs, horses occasionally. And my wife photographs our pups. And Daniel does horses.
Awesome. Where's my reptile people though? Come on, guys. I know there's a few of you out there.
Maybe we'll get some ideas changing after this.
Yeah, well, and it's pretty common that is a very specialized area. And I would say that starting out, it's not where most people are going to, go in that direction, because most animals that are photographed are either cats or dogs. I mean, that's the biggest grouping of pet owners out there. So, and that's mainly what we'll talk about tonight, is more of tips for, working in the studio, some do's and don'ts, and, mainly things for working with dogs and cats. But if people have questions, and during the slideshow there isn't something there to cover that covers something else, pop it in the questions right away, because I will say I'm more of a teacher type than a speaker type, so I like answering a lot of those questions. So let's go to.
All right, we do have covered that is representing the dragon lizard though.
All right, awesome. Gotta love me some bearded dragons. So yeah, and so Chris covered all this, so I can skip that. And I did do a lot of volunteer work, and this actually is representative of something recent because I work with a foster group for Huskies, and this happened to be one of the fosters that we were doing a transport for. Um, it just, you can draw animals from anywhere, whether you're bringing them into the studio, whether you're, photographing at a shelter or a rescue, there's opportunities out there if you haven't worked with animals before to really get out there and, get that experience. So was just one of my favorites from a recent.
I love those eyebrows.
Yeah. she was just a little ball of sass. So, and I happen to find this quote online because if you're a pet photographer, you need to love animals more than anything. And so money can buy you a fine dog, but only love can make it wag its tail. And that goes for anybody that wants to work with animals. You can be a regular photographer and bring animals into the studio, work with them, or with families and things like that. But you can really see the difference when pet photographer is passionate about their work and can really communicate with those animals. I do a lot of, in my larger programs, we do a lot of discussion on actual animal behavior, and some of the things that you can watch for. But in general, I would say that the first thing is that you need to be able to really enjoy the animals that you're working with. And on a side note, if you don't like a particular animal or are afraid of a particular animal, that is going to show. And that's when you say that you aren't the best fit for that particular client. I do have friends that occasionally have said, I'm afraid of a specific type of dog, or I just can't even look at a snake, and so that's when I just say, then you politely turn down, that client and say that I'm just not the right person for you, because it can carry over and show in your work. But I think that most pet photographers, if you're really, a niche photographer doing pet photography, then I would say that, most people are in love with the animals and, what they do. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we know this no matter what kind of photography that we, do. I put this particular picture in here. Many of the people that are listening probably have heard of AIM, which is the Animal Image Makers Conference. It's held in April in Minneapolis, but they have a print competition every year as well. The fun thing about it is that in their print competition, they have a category called bloopers. So this was actually an image that I entered into the blooper category, but it did so well that I actually entered it into IPC, and it merited there as well. It's just a comical image. I was setting it up for, and I do have the quote unquote perfect one of this image, where, they're all lined up the way they're supposed to be. They're all looking at the camera. They're all doing what they're supposed to. But believe it or not, the owners love this picture. This is the picture that she has, hanging on her wall. And this really tells the story for them, because it tells some of the personality of each dog in this photograph. And so that's why I thought that this was really one of the best things to, emphasize, that, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we may look at this as a pet photographer and say, I see all the mistakes and, this isn't the perfect looking at me image. But this really is what tells the story. This tells the character of all of the dogs that you're looking at in the image. So that's one of my actual favorite images. It makes me laugh whenever I look at it. So I have a few samples of my work that I'm just going to kind of go through. and you can kind of just see, this is obviously, I threw a few snakes in there first, because I got to get grab attention. So we're just gonna look at a few of these. As you can see, I do some themed, like stylized images. I do some traditional portraiture. I do families with their dogs. The one in the corner of this sample is actually what I call my celebration of life sessions, which I'm actually known in the area for. People will come to the studio, or I will go to their homes. This poor little guy, Enzo, was so loved by his owners, but the following day after this session, they had to put him to sleep. And so I had a whole session of, them spending time with him, and we got pictures of him by himself. But this is the image that they had enlarged to, a 20 by 24 to hang on their wall, because it just captured the raw emotion of how much they care for the dog. So, it just, you can see the different styles. Oh, were you going to say something, Chris?
No, I'm just smiling from ear to ear. I just love it.
And some of these, like the one up in the corner with all the puppies, that I photographed in the studio, and it's really one of those, what do you call them? The 9 cute, they're cubbies, that you would normally put little fabric, drawer type things in each of them. And I just took the back off of it, and, I use it for photographing. But I wanted something a little bit to grab the attention. And so, once you look at it closely, you discover, oh, there is a crazy cat trying to figure out what he's looking at with all these, other little puppies and stuff like that. And so I try to, if I'm not telling a story that the owner wants, I try to come up with a story of my own. And that you'll notice in the one with the snake and the rats, that was one that I entered in IPC, and it's called Meals on Wheels. So I'm telling a story. Not everybody might be fond of that story, but it's a story nonetheless. And again, I do love pure, clean portrait work as well. It's super fun to create stories and, have something that is engaging. And yet I do find that I just love portraits as well, where you look at that cat and you're just drawn into the face and the eyes, and that type of thing. So nice, clean portrait work is something that I really enjoy as well. So I guess we'll go, unless anybody has any questions, comments.
Lisa did post a link to the Animal Image Makers competition, though. If anybody's interested in checking that out, the link's in chat.
Perfect. So, because we don't have a ton of time, I pulled together basically tips, tricks, some do's and don'ts, things like that, for working with animals. There's so much to working with animals, and I have so many different programs that I thought this would be a good way just to kind of give everybody little bits. And so I'll start with, again, the do's for some of these, and I say a lot of this can relate to other animals. It's not just dogs or cats. The first one, letting the animal warm up to you gradually. And that is referenced to the session, because I do a pre-consultation as well. I require all of my clients to come in a week and a half before the session. And I sit down with them and we talk about, the types of things that they're interested in, as far as their goals for the session, in terms of, is it a stylized shoot? Are we going with a theme? Are we, do we have something in particular that we're trying to match, maybe an older photo of another animal, that type of thing. So we're talking through all of those types of things, whether they want to be in the photographs as well. And I do encourage owners when they come in, I do try to talk them into at least being in one or two of them. Most are like, no, we just want to get pictures of the pet. We don't want to be in it or whatever. But animals are with us for such a short amount of time. And we tend to forget those feelings that we have as we love them and then they pass away. And we have another that, can fill that space for a while. But to really have those memories, you want to be in the pictures with them as well. So I do encourage them, even just one or two. If they don't want to do it, for the whole session, just one or two pictures. And during the pre-consultation, we talk through all those things. We also talk about, what are they looking for? Wall portraits? Are they looking for, something like a coffee table book or an album? Depends on the age of the animal. I have a Watch Me Grow program for my puppies and kittens. So we do sessions throughout the year and put those together. And a lot of the times the clients want to do, a full album of all of those sessions. If not, then typically at the end of that session or that year, we do like a triptych or a quad of one from each session that they can hang on their wall. Those are all the things that I do during the first part of the pre-consultation. And in the meantime, while they're there, I've got the dog, the puppy, the kitten, even sometimes, people bring some of their small animals, and I'm letting them sort of look around the studio and engage in all of the things that I have there. I'm usually sitting on the floor so that they can get to know me and my equipment and, come sniff around and see, that it's not scary. I trigger my lights while I'm there. So, they can be prepared for that flash when they come back. Those are all things that I'm doing during the pre-consultation. But the idea with me sitting on the floor is that if they're a little bit nervous or hesitant, you're down at their level, and that's going to encourage them to be more inquisitive. That's going to, draw them to you more. So, you want them to get in that direct, you want them to come to you on their terms. So, just let them work up to it gradually. And I always do that at the session as well. I sit down for a few minutes, let them reconnect with the studio, reconnect with me. I don't have them come, right in and say, okay, let's go. Let's get these pictures done. They need time to adjust. A lot of animals don't travel well necessarily, or the only time they get into a car is when they're going to the vet or, something like that. So you want them to have that experience and it not be scary. And so they need some decompression time. So I usually allow them that amount of time, before a session as well. Next, especially with puppies, you need to be prepared. I would say that newborn photographers probably would be the most likely to relate to this because, their stuff gets pooped on and peed on and, stuff like that. But with puppies and kittens and, even with small animals like guinea pigs and rabbits and that, your clothes can get ripped, you might get bruised, things get knocked over as, animals are moving around and things like that. So you just need to be prepared for those things, have I have multiple rolls of duct tape all over my studio ready to grab at a moment's notice, for taping something together that might have gotten broken or knocked down or whatever. And, I keep a whole bin with things like safety pins and paper clips and, different types of tape and, just all kinds of things that, you might need to repair something. I have my own little tool set of, a drill and a hammer and screwdriver and all that kind of stuff too. So if something, a chair leg breaks or whatever, you want to be able to quickly put those things back together. And then keep going. For mainly, I would say dogs and cats, because they are very specific between breeds. You want to know the differences between, Great Danes and Chihuahuas. And, besides their size, they have different temperaments. They may have similar hair types, or, when you're looking at the difference between a Pomeranian and a Chihuahua, the hair type is huge there. Or knowing that your northern breeds are double coated. So I tend to keep my studio much cooler for those dogs that, are coming in with those thick coats, and they overheat, quickly. So you want to read up and be knowledgeable. And I always ask on the phone, even before the pre-consultation, I will ask the owners, what breed is it, or at least what mix is it if it's not a purebred, because you can at least look up some of the characteristics of the mixes that it has, because some of those characteristics are going to be the most prominent, and you'll be able to see that when you meet the animal. And it helps your client to feel like you're connecting right with them. You're not just, you're not just, oh, it's a dog, bring the dog in, sit the dog down, take the photograph. You're connecting with them on a level that means something. For myself, I am a husky lover. And so I know for myself that when I go to another business or talk with another person and suddenly there's knowledge there of that same breed, we connect and we can talk, and get to know each other. And so when you do this with your client, they feel cared for. They feel like you took time and energy to know more about their dog or their cat and, its characteristics. And if you know more, they're going to open up to you more personally themselves, and it just makes the overall experience that much easier. And then I talked about, the pre-consultation and why it will help, with your session. It not only helps with having the dog or cat or animal familiarize themselves with you, it allows you to kind of get to know the owner themselves too. I joke sometimes that owners and their animals really have a lot of similar characteristics. If you have a dog that's a little neurotic, sometimes their owner is a little bit, there too. You get a feel for, that when you're sitting down and talking to them. You also will be able to determine at that point how accurate their information that they're giving you is. And what I mean by that is a lot of owners will say either that, oh, my dog doesn't do anything. He doesn't know anything. He's never been trained. I don't know how you're going to get him to do anything. And you can see at that point by bringing them in, whether the owner is really, a little bit on base with how squirrely their dog might be. Or you have the opposite where an owner will say, oh yeah, they're so well behaved. They're so trained, you're not going to have any problems. And they come to the pre-consultation and the dog won't even sit for 2 seconds for you. So this helps you, continue to build the knowledge that's going to help create a more successful session.
So, do have a question from Alan. Wants to know if you have any recommendations on cleaning materials to tidy up poop and pee.
Absolutely, I do, and I forgot to put them in the slides. What I do is I have a multi-step process. I have purchased, it's an industrial strength cleaner that they use at like your shelters and stuff like that, where they have to get rid of everything, to make sure that, because obviously we don't want any potential for transferring diseases, and things like that. And just keep in mind, parvo, if you allow an animal that happens to have, or a puppy that happens to have parvo into the studio, that can remain in the studio for months afterwards. And it can then be transmitted. So you do want to have a good cleaning process in place. So I use this industrial strength, and I can't remember the name of it, but you can get, there's several versions on Amazon for it. I clean everything down with that, but then after everything's dried, I go back over it with a non-toxic cleaner, because I want to get rid of, after it's done its job of eliminating all the bacteria and that, I want to get rid of the residue that's left by some of those cleaners, because they can potentially, if a dog comes in and starts licking the floor area or whatever, it could make them sick. So I do that in a 2-step process. And that's, I clean all of my surfaces, all my hard surfaces, all my props, things like that, in this process. Fabrics, I have a spray that is it's a non-toxic spray to spray down like couches and, chairs or things like that, if I'm using them. And then if I use any type of fabric backdrop, I bring them home and wash them immediately after a session. Or in my case, you will notice from a lot of my work, I actually use mainly seamless papers, and then we'll put overlays like this image we're looking at right here with this puppy. That was a blue seamless paper, and I've just used an overlay over top of it to create that, sort of muslin canvas look to it. Because then after every session, I cut off the bottom of that paper and throw it out, so that there's nothing to worry about there as well. So it's definitely a good idea to put, things in place. If you do multiple sessions in a day, I always leave a time frame of, at least 2 hours in between, so that I don't have traffic going back and, crossing each other. And it gives me that time to do a double clean. Not everybody does that. That's just what I've always done. I've just felt it, it's important to make sure that we don't have any potential for transferring, illnesses. And because for me, I'm not just doing dogs and cats. I do bring in chickens and ducks and reptiles and snakes and things like that, that could potentially not necessarily transfer something themselves, but something from one of the other animals could transfer to them, with their immune systems, that I don't want to have any potential problems. And that's something that I do talk with the owners about in the pre-consultation as well. A lot of owners will ask, well, I see that you do this or that, or I've had rats in the studio and that makes people a little uptight, and I say, I clean everything, everything's wiped down and cleaned twice, so that there isn't that potential for transfer.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good question. And it wasn't something I had really covered a lot in there. I will try to. Can I send you, Chris, the names of those products after? And can you put it, will you be able to add it to?
If you do it immediately afterwards, yes.
Okay, I'll have to look them up. So,
Okay.
okay.
If not, then I can have it for when the replay is done up.
Okay, perfect. All right. So going on to some of the other things that you want to do, appearing relaxed, calm, confident, and happy, showing what you enjoy doing. And it seems like something that's pretty basic that, we as photographers typically enjoy what we do, no matter what we're photographing. But appearing relaxed and calm and confident, you want to be able to approach not only the client, but you want to be able to approach the animal with that demeanor. Animals are very, very sensitive and empathetic to our feelings and will feed off of those feelings, so the more relaxed and confident that you feel about, the session you're doing and the subjects you're meeting, the better that's going to transfer not only to the owners, because if you're uptight, that makes the owners uptight, that makes the animals uptight. But you can, by being calm and confident, can make those owners feel relaxed, and that therefore transfers to the animals. They feel relaxed, and they're going to be more likely to respond to the things that you want done. So we have to remember that this isn't something that's typically normal for most animals. We pull out our cell phones, and everybody takes snapshots of their dogs and cats and, that type of thing. But it's not a common occurrence for most animals to leave their home, go to a strange place, have a stranger, kind of helping to move them around and tell them what to do and flash lights at them and, things like that. So, they're already going to have the potential for some nervousness. So I always tell the owners, we don't want any of that feeling, to come from us, the people, and so that's why that's another reason to do the pre-consultation, so that you can kind of get the owners on board for how you want them to be able to manage and handle their animals. And that leads me into the next one with being firm with your commands. Sometimes you have to be the one to take over, because if you're like me, there are often times where, even though we've discussed what's going to happen during a pre-consultation, the owners will come in, they'll take the dog off the leash because they know that, I'm going to let them run around in that. And then after 10 minutes or so, I'll say, okay, let's, everything looks good, let's get going. And the owners just stand there because they don't know what to do, and so sometimes you have to jump in and say, okay, we're going to get them on the chair, or we're going to put them on this bench, or we're going to put them in this cute little, crate on wheels and things like that. And you're helping to command, because the owners, a lot of times, okay, they'll get that and they'll do the process of putting the animal in that crate. And then they sort of step back, or they put their hand out and don't jump, don't, and so you have to be a little firm and, with your, okay, stay, if the dog knows what a stay is, or if the dog knows what a sit is, be firm with that, so that they know that that's what they're supposed to do. And when it comes from somebody besides their owner, typically it's a little bit of a, oh, somebody else is telling me what to do. And so they'll stop and pause and do what they're supposed to, at least for a short amount of time. I also do, if I have an owner that brings in, whether it's a puppy, or whether it's a dog that they've just gotten and there's no training, or whether they just have never taken the time to train the dog to do anything, I try teaching the owners how to teach their dog to sit before they come back in for the session. And it's an easy process to teach a owner how to teach them to sit. And I just say, go home, and over the next week before your session, you need to do that. Most owners, because they will see the little bit of a response I can get very quickly from them, and I say, if they'll respond to me this quickly, they're going to respond that much better in a week's time, and they're probably going to stay there longer than, with what I just did now. Then most owners will be on board with doing that then when they see the potential for it. A lot of people have just never really learned techniques to train their dogs. And so a very simple way to teach a sit is, obviously using treats, because in this situation, we want this to be fast. We don't want it to be a long drawn out thing. So I will tell the owners in this instance, since they've never been taught anything else, we're going to use treats, because that's either treats, or if they're motivated by a toy or whatever is their biggest motivation, we're going to use that to get the quickest response. And so you'll stand in front of the animal so that you're up over top of them, and you'll step towards them, and you'll take a step or two steps. And what will almost 100% of the time naturally happen is the dog goes to back up and his butt sits down on the ground, because he doesn't know what else to do. You're sort of over top of him, stepping towards him, so he's going to sit. And so you say, sit, as soon as he's done it. You do that multiple times. If they don't do it immediately, draw that hand up over their head as you're stepping towards them, so that they look up and they're directed to your hand, which potentially has a treat in it. So they know that there's a reward there, and you tell them to sit, and you take that step. And as soon as their butt hits the ground, give them that treat. You do that a couple of times, they're going to get the idea of it, and you've shown the owner how to do it enough to make it something successful. And typically by the time the owner comes back for their session, the dog will have learned to sit. Stay, you may be able to squeeze that in. It depends on the nature of the dog at that point. But even if I don't have a good stay taught, I usually have other things that I can use that will get them to stay there and respond to me, enough to get that image. I'm going to skip, just so that I can sort of emphasize, I'm going to skip the G for a minute and come back to it. Using the types of positive reinforcements that motivate the dog, it's kind of what I meant for commands as well as for training. And you can use these types of things for attention. I was telling Chris a little earlier about a product that I make called a WAG. It's a wickedly awesome attention getter. And this is what I typically use to get those reactions, so that, if Chris, if you want to throw that up, you can.
I just did.
Oh, okay. I don't see it, but okay.
Nope. Yep.
So I use that so that even if they haven't learned stay and you've gotten them to sit, or even sometimes when they're standing there, but they haven't moved towards you yet, you make a sound, you make a noise, you get their attention in some way that is a distraction from moving their body, and they go, oh, and then they'll stay there long enough. They'll give you that little cocked head tilt, so you're utilizing those types of things for positive reinforcement, for attention getting, to keep them in it sounds like it's sort of an oxymoron, because you're making sounds and noises and they're going to want to come to you, but it's enough to keep them in place for a short amount of time. And so those are the types of things that I use, for all of those things. Was there any questions about that before I?
Got Carolyn that's saying that she has a wagon. It's super effective.
Good. I'm glad. So then popping back to G, being the one controlling the session, not the owner. Um, Owners tend to come in, and one of the things they will do if they, if you've told them, okay, you want their help in, getting the dog into position and things like that so that you can stay back by the camera. Sometimes then the owner thinks that they're the ones that need to get the focus of the dog, or the focus of even cats, and things like that. But you have to stay in control of that session, because you're the one that you want the animal looking at you, not at the owner. The owner may be off over to your side. The owner may be, if it's a puppy or a kitten or something small that's going to scurry, you've got the owner like literally next to the table you might be working on, or something like that. You don't want the animal focusing on the owner that's right there. You still want to be in control of the session and have the animal focusing on you. So I always tell the owners, unless you are directly behind me and I've asked you to do something, then let me be the one to get the animal's attention. Don't call their name, don't shake the bottle, things like that. Don't shake your keys. A lot of owners bring their keys and want to shake their keys over my head. you know, Things like that. And you just you have to put your foot down and say, I need them to respond directly to me. I want them looking right in the camera so that it looks like, they're communicating. And if they're, looking off to the sides and to the owners and things like that, most of the time you're not going to get that really, intense look in the camera. Now, there are times where you might want those looks, or you might want the dog, gazing off to the owner, and that's fine, but you're still the one that's in control of the session if you put that into play. And there have been instances that I have requested that the owners, they can't quite get that. And I'll say, you know what? Why don't you go just sit in my conference room, have a cup of coffee, or, have a bottle of water. There's, all kinds of things to look through, that type of thing. Let me see what I can do on my own. And I'll send them out of the room, because, if you just have an owner that can't let go of that control, the dog is never going to respond to you while they're there. And so I would rather, work with the dog one-on-one than have that complication of the owner. And I know people will ask, well, how do you do that by yourself then? Potentially, there could be complications if we're talking about puppies, or, you're worried about animals falling off of things and you don't have somebody there. But in most instances, I can step away from the camera. I have a remote trigger, so I can set everything up so that I'm ready. I can be where I need to be for the animal and still be taking the photographs with the remote trigger. And it works pretty successfully, unless you've got a really wiggly animal. Again, another reason for a pre-consultation, you can know that ahead of time. And if you feel it necessary, bring in a pet wrangler. I actually am able to utilize, if I ever need one, I call a couple of the volunteers at my local Humane Society, and one of them will come down and wrangle for a session for me, because I do a lot of work for them. That, I do a lot of their stock images, I do their adoption images, things like that. And so they're happy to help me every once in a while if I need it. So you can reach out to, rescues, shelters, humane societies, reach out to grooming places, anything that, even pet boutiques that, have animals that come in on a regular basis. You can reach out to a lot of those people, and you can find somebody that you can use as a wrangler when needed.
We do have a
And
couple
then,
questions.
perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
So, first one from Carolyn. Do you have any good tips for keeping a dog's tongue in their mouth?
I do, and that's going to be on one of my next slides.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, we'll get to that one then from Alan.
Yep.
Do you pre-focus when you use the remote trigger?
I do most of the time. Yep. I have it set up so that wherever and when I say that, I pre-focus and then I flip it to manual and leave it there. I will shoot a couple, then I'll go back so that I'm constantly moving back and forth between the camera. But you can usually get a couple of shots in the same plane of focus before the animal moves and you have to readjust. But I just feel more comfortable if I've pre-focused and then flip it to manual. I know a lot of in fact, the one that I have says that it will refocus. I just don't necessarily trust it. So I just, technology can be, it can goof up and stuff. So I pre-focus and then set it to manual. I'll take a couple of images. Then potentially if I'm doing this myself, I let the animal have a small break. Then we try something else, get them into a new position. I'll pre-focus in that area, set it to manual, and then, we may do a couple more, that type of thing. So it's kind of a back and forth process.
Cool. And we've got about 10 minutes left, just so you have a time check.
Oh, okay. All right. So last thing on here is remember, especially dogs, but every animal has a very short attention span. They're like children. And so you really can't be just trying to shove 2 hours worth of photographing, down a dog's throat or, a cat, or, you definitely can't with things like reptiles because they need breaks very quickly because you have to warm them back up. They spend most of their lives under heat lamps. And so if you take them out and you're photographing them, you have a short span and then you need to put them back in and put them back under heat lamps and let them, readjust their body temperatures and things like that. So when you're doing things, plan on breaks. I usually allot myself a 2-hour time slot for a session, knowing that I probably only spend 25 to 30 minutes of it shooting, a lot of breaks in between. Okay, here's a few don'ts. Don't call any animal. I have dog because I did just copy a few of these things from another thing, but any animal, if you call them by name, what's the first response that any pet has to their name? They're going to come straight at you. So whether it's the owner, whether it's you, if you're calling them by name to get their attention, they're less likely to stay in the spot that you've put them because they're going to hop down, they're going to run towards you, that type of thing. Good?
Yep.
Okay. And so you want to be able to find other ways to, get their attention, like using all of, the noisemakers. There are apps on your phone that make all kinds of animal sounds that you can utilize. You just have to train your brain not to call the animals by name. You don't want to, I have this in here. It's a little bit of a hit or a miss. When you crouch down during the session, if you've been standing up and you crouch down to their level, a lot of the times the animals are just going to immediately respond to that, thinking to come to you. Now, there's 2 ways to think of this, though, that a lot of pet photographers do work right on the floor. They're photographing the animals right on the floor. They're down on the floor. And you have to be then. But then you're already usually there while somebody else is putting the animals into position. When I say don't crouch down like that, it's really meaning don't go from a whole bunch of, you're standing up, you're behind the camera. They are, either on the floor, they might be in a chair or on a box or, a bench or something like that. And the minute you crouch down, to their level, they want to be right in your face. And so you have to be careful about how you move around in front of the animals, and where you're going to place yourself. Because I would say 80% of my work is in studio. I shoot on a camera stand a lot of the time because I put the animals up on things. I have a big giant square coffee table that I've covered with different types of things, so that it just looks like a platform, basically. I have different chairs, benches, tons of different crates and boxes and, ottomans and things like that. So typically I'm trying to get them up off the floor. And part of the reason for that is also that if they're up off the floor, they're more likely to stay in place for a few seconds longer. Not necessarily a lot, but it might just be that 1 or 2 seconds that you need in order to get that photograph. Also, don't manhandle the animals. And when I say manhandle, I typically will walk or have the owner walk a dog into place rather than making them sit and then starting to shove their butt around to make them get into where you want them to be. It's much easier to walk an animal into place or to encourage them into a place rather than shoving and pushing. And, because if the dog's at all fearful, or, a kitten is scared of other people, that it's just going to either shut down, it's going to respond in fear. You're certainly not going to get the response that you want. And it could potentially turn aggressive. An animal could bite. And that's certainly not where we want to end a session. Don't ignore the animal's body language just because you're still hoping for that perfect shot. If they start to shut down, if they are looking fearful, if they're looking a little aggressive and the hackles are up, it's time for a break. You might not necessarily have to completely shut down the session, but it is time for a break. And then I always recommend, if you are shooting out of the studio in a public location of any type, like a park or that, I won't normally, and I, again, find this out at the pre-consultation, if it's a fearful or an anxious dog, or any way aggressive, towards animals at all, I won't usually take them to the parks. But if the owner says, well, it's just if, an animal comes near him, whatever, I really want to do this, we will always keep them on a leash. I would rather edit the leashes out than not have the ability to restrain the animal that we're working with, or to potentially bring that animal, behind us if there's another animal or, that's aggressive, that type of thing. So you just really need to think about where you're going for the session, what the animal is like, and what, the potentials are for that location. And so here's a couple of helpful tips, and I'm going to try to do this fast because there's like 3 or 4 more slides, but okay. Positive reinforcements. That's what you have to do, everything with positive reinforcements. As far as what I use in the studio, I use like Zooks, which are little training treats, or other brands of training treats. One of the reasons I like Zooks is because they're really smelly, and the dogs really like them when they're smelly. But they're also very, very small. I try to discourage owners from bringing big, huge treats with them, milk bones, even if that's their main treat. simply because then, you've got to wait for that dog to eat an entire milk bone. And then there's crumbs everywhere. And then they want to lick up the crumbs. And you've lost their attention just over eating one little milk bone. Whereas these training treats are just so very tiny that it's like a taste and a swallow. So I try to stick to those. I usually use the grain-free, low-fat ones because that way we eliminate the potential for most allergy issues. Again, I discuss that with the owners ahead of time, whether they do have any allergies. And I won't use my treats if there are allergies. I will have the owners bring their own. But you will find a lot of the times that the animals will respond to new treats better because suddenly they're a higher value than what they're used to. So a lot of the times they will work for what you have better than what their owners bring. And some of the other things that you can resort to if you can't do treats or whatever for grain or wheat issues or anything like that, low-fat string cheese and low-fat hot dogs are decent options. You cut them up into little tiny training treat sizes, and you can use those as well. We did actually already talk about how to actually train the dog to sit. Just remember using a direct, firm voice while you're doing it so that they respond. Using vocal noises, noisemakers, squeakies, whistles, crinkly things. I always have some type of thing that will crinkle, like a cat toy, a bottle, things like that, because a lot of dogs will respond to that because they think it's the potato chip bags at home or whatever that they might be able to get a snack from. So having something that makes crinkly noises is actually a really good option for getting attention. Here's what one of our people asked about. So a lot of the times you get dogs in, it's a stressful situation. They might not even be hot, but they're stressed. And so they're panting. And it's a very common, stress relief for them. And you don't want all of the, tongue hanging out for all of the time and that type of thing. You can do a couple of things. You can actually stick your thumb sort of on their tongue towards the back and hold it for a second. And you usually ask the owner to do this because you're at the camera at that point because you need to get the shot. Have them do that. That dries out the tongue enough that they will close their mouth and keep it closed for a minute because they don't like the dry feeling on their tongue. They don't like their mouth or tongue to be dry. And so that helps. A little tiny bit of peanut butter that you can put on the roof of their mouth or on the tip of their tongue so that they will make some smacking noises. But then if you do that with a very small amount, while they're kind of licking, and you use your attention getters, they will stop and look at you, but their mouth will still remain closed. If all else fails, you kind of just have to wait it out too, because eventually the dog does need to swallow. You just kind of got to watch, be prepared, keep using the attention getters, whatever you're using, because a lot of the times if they're just panting and their tongue's hanging out, the ears are sort of at a relaxed position. The facial muscles might not be alert, that type of thing. And you do want that response. So if you wait it out and you start to see that it looks like, the tongue's going to go back in a bit, get their attention. A lot of times all it takes is as soon as you grab attention and they start to cock that head, because what is that sound? Their mouth will close. So, a few tips there, and you just got to kind of play with it until you get it. Walking the animal into place. Again, I walk them around into place rather than shoving them around. And you want to walk them into a position so that you're angled not only do we want to define the body like we angle our own bodies to define and give highlight and shadow to a human body. We want to do that as well for an animal's body. We also want to cover parts. They have parts showing that we don't necessarily want to see in the image. And so this is a good way, their paw, angle it so that one paw is just right in front of. And so it's a pleasing pose that sort of covers all of that. And then just remember, as many instances as possible, show the tail. If they've got a tail and it's big and it's fluffy, show it. Have the owner bring it around, floof it, that type of thing, wrap it up over the back, whatever you can do to highlight that tail. Owners love to see their dog's tails. Another thing that helps when you're greeting a dog, this was actually something that I got. This was a tip I learned from another pet photographer many, many years ago. When you're greeting them, don't just go up to them full bodied, sort of throwing yourself at them, that type of thing. Approach them from the side of your body because it makes you look smaller, and then extend your hand. You seem less threatening to them that way. And so, it shrinks the size and they're less likely to feel overwhelmed, even crouching, bending at the knees while you're doing it is going to make them feel less threatened. And then I always suggest, unless the owners are very specific about it for some type of, either it's a brand new fancy collar or maybe there's some type of sentimental reason about it, ask to take it off. Sometimes the owners they never even think about it and they're like, oh no, the collar's fine. He wears it all the time. And then they get the images and they look and it, the collar's dirty and, it looks kind of ratty. And then they're like, oh, can you edit that out? I will, but I'd rather not have to if I have the opportunity to take it off. And if they really, really want to leave the collar on, at least either take the tags off or flip it around so that the tags are in the back so that you don't see them. Because most of the tags are not even, it's usually rabies tags and, things that might just have a phone number or something like that. It's not, unless it's like one big, name tag bone or something they want to highlight, you don't want to have to worry about editing those as well.
So we've got a quick question from
Okay.
Carol, and then I've got a couple of prizes to give away. So we're at.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So Carol wants to know, can you overuse attention getters or should you use them sparingly?
Animals have short attention spans. And so I rotate through all of mine. I don't just stick with one. It may seem like one works and it just keeps working for a little while, but attention, any type of thing that's going to get their attention is eventually going to bore them. And so I wrote, like on my WAG, there's like 12 or 13 different things on there. I rotate through all of them and then I might go back to something else, or I might try one of the other things that I just have laying around my studio if I still need them. But yeah, you just want to keep rotating and not utilizing them more than a handful of times before going to another one.
And where can you get the WAG at?
Directly from me. I do have a Facebook page that is photographers. It's, facebook.com, photographers, WAG, WAAG. And you can message me through there, or you can just email me directly because they're all custom made. So I have a handful of questions I have to ask about, what kind of things that you want style wise. And then, we just go from there. So.
Okay. I'll post the link in the follow-up email that goes out. So they've got a link to the Facebook page as well as your contact information. But I've got a few prizes to give away. So thank you, ACI, for giving us stuff to share with you. So first up, we've got a $50 lab credit to ACI. So let's see who the winner of that one is. The wheel of prizes spinning. one's Kathy. Congratulations on that one. Up next, we've got a $75 lab credit. So let's see who the winner of that one is. All right. We got one more prize to give away, and that's a $100 lab credit to ACI. And so we'll see you that one. And it's Rebecca. Very cool. And also want to let you guys know about the upcoming episodes. We've got Hands-on Marketing from Allie Elliott. She's also doing a pre-con at Imaging USA. Northern Lights with Megan Sugden. And Making Your Art Personal with Julie Savage coming up. And one more. All of these are open for registration. Old Hollywood Lighting with Phil White. So registration is live and open on those ones. So be sure to check those out. Cool. And we are just about out of time, Angela. Any parting thoughts for us as we go in and continue to become pet whisperers?
Well, did anybody, I mean, hopefully there was a lot of information. We didn't quite get through everything, but you know, if somebody put a shout out, if you actually, you know, felt like you learned and took away some things, but hope. And I will say that I am also speaking at AIM in April. And so it'll be on an entirely different topic of animals. So hopefully people will come and see me there.
Very, very cool. So make sure to check that one out and start cyber stalking you. And we are getting lots of comments about great information, including Deborah wants to know if she can peek at your last slide that you had up there. We probably won't have time to go over it because everybody else has life and plans and things.
Right.
So we like to try to stay as focused on there. But do you mind if we showcase that last slide just so that she can check it out?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So we'll leave that one up so you can get a screenshot or just read over it really quick. But thank you so much for joining us, Angela.
Well, thank you. It was great being here.
All right. Well, have a great night, everybody.